ability. So speaking of question marks, let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 8-9 last year. Somehow. Yeah. I mean, this won't be a long one, and neither will the Falcons, but there are some highlights we want to make here. So Vegas has 6.5 wins for them. Obviously, without Tom Brady, the win total is going to go down. They won the division with, listen to this, a minus 45 point differential. The worst in their division, the lowest scoring in their division, yet they won the division. That just goes to show that this division is anybody's, and they beat up on each other. They had the highest passing volume, number 2 in yards, and the number 1 in actual attempts. So to me, you've got
throw last year's numbers out the window.
Exactly. That's what I was about to say. To me, you can't go off of that. I feel like that's going to change. I feel like they're going to be a little bit more balanced coming this year. Don't see them being the way Tom Brady was. They had to be because of where they were. But you did a little short recently on Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. Just spend 1 minute on these guys who are both QB 29 or QB 32 and QB 35 respectively.
Should we just insert my short here? Because that's 1 minute.
Make it quick.
Make it quick. All right. Well, here's my consensus on this is that Kyle Trask is going to end up being the starter. Baker Mayfield's going to be the starter to start the season. And he's going to lose a job because he's going to turn the ball over, because that's what Baker Mayfield does, is turn the ball over. And if he's been consistent in anything, it's turning the ball over.
That's all you need to say. I mean, I think that, to me, in that opinion, you're not going to draft one of these guys with confidence.
Like, I think Kyle Trask is like, it's going to be interesting to see, we played last in 20 in the short, they played last in 2020, right? At Florida, he threw for 4,200 yards. He threw for 43 touchdowns, only threw for 8 interceptions. And they did that in the SEC. He only has 9 passes in the NFL. Like, he didn't play at all his rookie year because Brady's there. And he threw 9 passes last year. He completed 3 of them. Like, there's not a huge sample size for NFL. So he's had a couple years to sit. And
still didn't win the role.
He still didn't win the role.
Over Baker Mayfield. That's what I'm just going to say about it. I mean, we can move on from these two quarterbacks. Yeah. Like, again, if you had an injury to quarterback and you're on the waiver wire and all of a sudden Kyle Trask is sitting there and he's looking decent and he's the starter at that point, or Mayfield's looking decent starter at that point, maybe grab him if you have an injury, but there's probably somebody else better on the waivers there, especially one quarterback elites.
Let me say this. Drafting one of these guys at any point in the draft is a bigger travesty than Bijan being taken ahead of Derrick Henry.
We're not on the Falcons yet. Okay, hold your horses.
I'm just saying, don't draft one of these quarterbacks for the love of God.
Okay. So speaking of running backs, Rashaad White is stepping into the role of the starter after playing second fiddle to Leonard Fournette last year. Problem was neither one of those guys were that good. And part of it being this offensive line. He was running back 42, had 129 carries for 481 yards, 1 touchdown, a measly 3.7 yards per carry. He did have 50 receptions for 290 and 2 touchdowns, so he was heavily targeted. But again, that was with Tom Brady, who was known to dump down to his guys, and he's not being a mobile guy and not having that much time back there. If I remember right, Leonard Fournette had more than 50 receptions himself too. So it wasn't just Rashaad White's a receiving running back. You can't call him that because both running backs, Lenny and him, both had it. They just happened to be at the hands of Tom Brady and benefited from that. So to me, Rashaad White's a guy that's going running back 24, 68th overall. He is not a guy that I'm targeting at a 0 RB situation as my first running back off the board. I would be happy to have him as my RB2 because the chance for him to succeed is there. If this offensive line is improved at all in the running game and he can get that yards per carry up to 4, I still don't see this team being successful enough scoring points where they're going to be in situations where he's going to score a lot or have a lot of opportunities. They may be passing a lot more often, which is why I'd rather have one of these 3 receivers. But quick, what's your thoughts? Rashaad White is the guy that you like. Do you see him improving from last year, or do you see him kind of being, just blah, like a guy that's just going to, sit there in your RB2 flex position and not really move?
No, I
but
really
not
like
really win you a week.
I actually like him this year, and I actually think you brought up a really good point. yeah, he's not going to be my first. If I'm going 0 running back, he's not going to be my first running back off the board, but he's damn well going to be my second. Like if you go and get Connor or you get Akers
or Sanders or
you get
Akers.
Sanders, he should be your second one. And you're going to be you're going to be pretty well off. If you're stacked up at receiver and you go 0 running back, having Rashaad White as a second running back is going to be really good for you. There's no one
play, yeah.
There's no one there. Like I still do expect them to go and sign a veteran. This is one of the teams that I expect that a veteran is going to come in, and just to have a change of pace because Keyshawn Vaughn is not that.
Well, Chase Edmonds, I was actually
there is
like liking Chase Edmonds. Yeah, but he just is gone for the season. I think he had an Achilles rupture.
Yeah,
so if I'm correct.
And so again, this is another team that I think is going to go and sign a veteran just to have another guy in there. But I think Rashaad White, well, I got to watch him at ASU because Forks Up, baby. But he is very, very talented as a runner, and he's talented as a receiver. And one thing Baker does is check down. And you saw it last year when he was with Carolina. You've seen it when he was when he was in Cleveland.
But he benefited from having two like really high-end pass-catching running backs in both Kareem Hunt and McCaffrey. So like it was also that confidence. So I agree with you. If he's got the confidence in Rashaad White, he's going to do it. But again, it's like
this is one of those.
It's not. I wouldn't call it apples to
competition.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And you still do have to respect their receivers. Like you still do have Mike Evans on the outside, and you still have Chris Godwin. Like they're both very, very good receivers. So you still do have to respect those. Is he going to face 8-man boxes because they don't fear the pass? Probably not. But he's not like he's a good enough running back to be productive. He wasn't inefficient. I think he had Leonard Fournette there last year that took a lot of the shine away.
He was very inefficient. But so was Leonard Fournette. That team was just efficient in the ground, period. I think he had 3.7. I think Fournette was like 3.69 or 3.7. Like they were pretty much almost the same. They were both well under 4 yards per carry.
It's going to be a volume play more than anything. I don't think Rashaad White, even with the volume and the increased workload, has a chance to be a top 10 running back, but you don't need him to be. If you're drafting him where you are as either, an RB2 or a flex, or, like if you get him in those two positions, you're going to be happy with him. He's going to produce. I don't see him stinking it up. I don't see him being outside the top 20. But I don't see him being inside the top 12. Like I think he's going to be in kind of that range. That's his ceiling. I think is 13, and I think his floor is probably going to be 20, 21. And that's where I think his range of outcome is, because there's just no one there right now. And
he's being drafted at RB 24. So you're hoping that you're drafting him at where you're drafting him at value where he's going to finish above his running back position that he's there. And that's what you got to hope for when you get him. Like you're not going to draft him and want him to finish at RB 28. So you mentioned the 3 receivers here who are probably going to be the biggest targets in this offense. And that's in Mike Evans, a guy who has yet to miss 1,000-yard season, and Chris Godwin, who had an amazing 100-catch season and barely made it over 1,000 yards. That was an interesting season for that. And Russell Gage, I'll bring up too, even though he's kind of, on the back burner. There is a good stat I want to bring out there that does bring to light somebody that could actually produce on this team too as well at times. So Mike Evans, he's going 80th overall, wide receiver 33. Godwin's going at 63rd overall, so he's going before Mike Evans. Do you have that in same order? Are you taking Godwin over Evans in this situation this year? Are you going to?
Someone's been listening to our podcast. Yeah, of course. I'm going to take Godwin over him. I mean, if you this is assuming that Baker Mayfield is going to be the starter and he's going to win the job. Baker Mayfield has never sustained a deep ball receiver. Mike Evans has his entire career had deep ball guys, whether it be Jameis Winston, Ryan Fitzmagic, or Tom Brady, and guys that are great at throwing the deep ball. And he's been successful in that. But even in those years,
except Tom Brady last year.
Yeah, but even in those years, like you look at the spread on his numbers, right? How many games did he have like these blow up games and then disappear, and then blow up games and then disappear? And I just don't think he's going to have those blow up games anymore because there's no one to throw the ball deep. Baker cannot throw the ball deep. and he's not been efficient at throwing the ball deep his entire career. And so unless Trask is the starter and they're just going to be losing games and just chucking the ball, Godwin's a safer play because Godwin.
Mike Evans last year, he had a 3 touchdown game, a 2 touchdown game, and 1 touchdown game, which gave him his 6 touchdowns. But he only had 4 games of wide receiver 15 or higher. He had 2 as a wide receiver 1, obviously with a 2 touchdown, 3 touchdown game, both over 100 yards. And that 3 touchdown, it was 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. But to me, the thing I agree, the only thing I will say is playing devil's advocate is I think Evans is the better red zone target, and touchdowns are king when it comes to fantasy football. And I think he can make his pay dirt for you alone. I could see him having double-digit touchdowns this year, but being his first season under 1,000 yards.
Yeah, well, when Baker did have his best season with Odell Beckham and with Landry, who was the better receiver there?
Landry. Obviously, Landry was, yeah.
So, and what type of receiver was Landry? Is more like the Godwin type of receiver. Correct. Versus Mike. I mean, Mike Evans and Odell Beckham are 2 very, very different receivers, but they are the more explosive, deep down the field plays. Whereas
also Baker also had a year with Landry before Odell came in, and like, yeah, but I see what you're saying. And I'm drafting Godwin above Evans too. I'm not fading Evans off my draft list because I still think Evans can have some volume because his team is going to have to pass the ball.
One thing, he's still the number 1 receiver, the juiciest it's ever been.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to get Evans at wide receiver 33, 80th overall, you're telling me that I can get him in literally the 7th round.
Great. Wide receiver 3 right there.
Sure.
I'll take it.
Yes, please.
Yes,
you know, it's like, I'll take that all day.
But he's been pretty consistent for both of us as being a bust candidate, and the bust candidate being because of the fact that I just don't see his numbers being where they were, because he's not going to have those 2-3 touchdown games like he did with these guys that throw the ball deep, and he's just athletically going to beat up anyone that's on the outside with him. Baker doesn't do that.
His role is going to have to change. If he's going to get his touchdowns, it's going to be in the red zone within the 20-yard line, and he's going to have a bunch of jump balls, which he's a freak athlete still.
Yes,
he's going to make it happen. I mean, heck, if he can make Johnny Manziel look that good, you know, I think he can make Baker Mayfield look that good too.
Did you see the proposed trade for him to the Jets today? That would be fantastic.
I've seen some wild things out there already.
I know, but like,
well, all right. So we got Godwin and Evans in our order in drafting these guys, and again, Godwin is juicy too because he's wide receiver. He's 63 overall. So again, you're talking about 5th, 6th round wide receiver there for a guy who has a chance to finish in the top 15. But Russell Gage is an interesting. Yeah, this is an interesting one. Russell Gage had 51 receptions last year for 426 yards. Not flashy numbers by any means. He had 5 touchdowns. All 5 touchdowns were red zone touchdowns, period. He had 12 receptions for 76 yards and 5 touchdowns in the red zone. He was one of the more efficient red zone receivers last year in terms of converting his targets and receptions into touchdowns. So that's the one thing I will say is that may benefit you as a flex play in grabbing a guy. If this team ends up being another season of volume passing because they're constantly behind in games and the run game is deficient, is getting somebody who's that short little slant where Baker's going to hit him on the slant in there going into the end zone, which is pretty much what Tom Brady did all last year. Again, I'm not saying draft him. He's wide receiver 109. He's free. I'm just saying don't forget that he's there mid-season when he's starting to get some more red zone targets and bye weeks are coming up and you need flex plays. I just thought that was just interesting. The fact that he had one of the more bigger red zone touchdown conversions out there on the list. So
he had Tom Brady throwing the football too.
Yeah, no, I said that that's why we didn't want to spend a ton of time on Tampa because it's a whole new offense when you have a whole new quarterback. You just don't know what you're going to